So we now turn our attention to friction, and we're going to try to develop some models of friction for us to be able to quantify how the frictional force sort of behaves. Frictional force is often thought of as an impeding kind of force, so something that sort of prevents motion or maybe slows our motion. Experience tells us that there's at least two different kinds of friction, as we'll look at down below. There's actually many different kinds of friction that we could look at. So some of the different kinds, air resistance is certainly a form of friction. Even rolling friction, when objects roll over top of each other, like wheels, also have some rolling friction. There's also, let's see, fluid resistance, so as in like water or something along those lines. Technically speaking, water and air are both fluids, so we could just say fluid resistance. The two kinds that we're going to look at here are static and kinetic friction. So first, gallon of orange juice, it's not going to move without some sort of force acting on it. So let's say I push this object to the left, and we don't move the object. What that means is that there is a static frictional force that opposes the initiation of sliding. So the object essentially remains stationary. Now the cool thing about static friction is that I like to think of it as a reactive force, or maybe a responding force, maybe a responsive force. It sort of exactly cancels any pushing or pulling force. No matter how hard I push, if it doesn't move, then that means static friction will exactly balance that. Now that also allows it to point in any direction. If I try to push to the left here, static friction will point to the right. If I try to push towards the right, static friction will point towards the left. So it can really point in any direction. Once the maximum static frictional force is exceeded, we see that motion will begin. And in that case, once I exceed the maximum static friction, then we get into kinetic friction. Kinetic friction, Greek for motion, that opposes the motion of two surfaces that are sliding over each other. Okay, so we're going to look at two different kinds of friction. We're going to call them Fs for static friction, and we're going to call it F sub k for kinetic friction.